think you recently created a little mold course. Or is it a master class technically?
Yes, it's a master class, right? I'm like, how do you name a course, right? It's very nebulous. Like, how do I decide what level this is? And I intended for it to be more basics, and it just turned into kind of a monster, kind of like any project that any of us do, because we're so nerdy that you just kind of like, I wrote like one layer, and then I was like, oh, that's just not enough. And then I wrote another layer. And so I added more and more onto it, but it's called the Mold Masterclass. And the reason I created it, y'all are mold environment, so to speak, experts in different regards. Sean with testing and environmental like surveillance and kind of looking for issues, and Adam with kind of the other side of mitigating. But I am a body expert person, right? So mold expert in terms of how to address the body side of things, which, like y'all said, that's usually why people come to you in the first place, is they've had some sort of body reaction or illness related to the mold. And so the environment's only one of those pieces. It's extremely important, but it's not all of it. And I found it hard to even direct people that I wasn't necessarily like, they weren't my client, or I didn't know them that well personally. I'm like, I can't spend, 14 years of my life cumulatively, like sending people links and here's what to do and all this stuff. So I was like, I'm going to put it all in one place. And I found that healing process to be pretty confusing when I started. And so I tried to streamline it as much as possible. And that's what the course is just a streamlined way of looking through what does the healing process look like, and how can we best support the body in a way that's not super overwhelming and extremely expensive and time consuming and all those things.
Well, it looks like here what you sent over to us, there's 5 important steps that you list. You want to walk us through some of those steps?
Right. And I think y'all will be very familiar with step 1, which is a healthy environment. I don't know why it's so funny, because people come to me with the mold body issues or symptoms or things like that, but they aren't normally that open to the depth and the breadth of actually addressing the environment completely. I think it just kind of scares them, and they just see dollar signs.
Yeah, it's like, overwhelming for sure.
Yeah. And I think it kind of makes you see your environment as something to be feared, where it could actually be something really empowering. So I first of all try to kind of help people shift the mentality from, we're looking for problems, this is so scary, like my house is a ticking time bomb, like I just never know when mold's going to happen, versus no, this is really empowering thing. If we know what to look for, we can optimize health now and going forward. Like, this is information that I never would have known before I had mold illness. And it's a huge blessing that I do, because now we're looking at houses to buy or to rent, and I know what to look for. I know the right people to ask, things like that. So a healthy environment can actually be really empowering, but it's a little bit pointless to address mold in the body while you're still living or, spending a lot of time in a super unhealthy environment. I liken it to, you're in a sinking ship and you're like, I've got this bucket, I'm bailing water out just fine. Like, and you're, why am I not making any progress? Like, why am I not actually like floating to the top here? It's because the ship's sinking and you're just bailing water out. So it has to be first. And that's where a lot of my people get tripped up. And so I share all the resources related to y'all and ways they can actually support themselves. But it's not always an easy sell. I really feel for people, because it really scares them sometimes.
Yeah, and we learned last episode with Marion that, I mean, there's certain ways you can support your body to just kind of help you get through living in a moldy environment. I truly believe that, just to support it a little better. But
right,
to hear the type of money people are spending on the health side of things before addressing what's in your home is where I think the mistakes are made.
Right. Yeah. And of course, I think there are things we can do to kind of like patch the holes better. Like, there's things you can take. There's ways you can support your body that will make your body tolerate it better. But if you're looking for like complete health restoration while still having active, really major mold issues, it's just usually not compatible. And I want people to know that, so they don't waste years of their life and time and money and all those things, when it'd be better served if they would start with something like for y'all. So I usually recommend that they test first. Like if there's anything questionable about your environment, test. Or, maybe they have an idea of where they were first exposed. I think most people tend to, but they don't really have an idea of if their current environment is still a trigger. Some people are very certain, like, oh, my current environment's not a trigger. Like I used to feel horrible every day when I lived in XYZ place, and now I feel fine. And it just feels like night and day. So they know that it's not a current issue, but most people don't really know if their current environment, specifically their home or their office, is actually a problem. So testing is really the only way to know that. And I say that as somebody who calls herself a mold sniffing dog. I'm really, really good at sniffing out mold in an environment, but I am not perfect. I have signed a lease before to an apartment that had really bad mold and was none the wiser because it wasn't something that was in any way visible. It was behind a wall. There was no smell. There was no issue that I could tell from any sort of exterior surface. It really takes a professional to know that. So being open to professional help in this way actually will save you time and money. That's my biggest tip. We can talk about doing like self-testing. Like a lot of people are like, oh, I bought some plates at Home Depot and laid them out. I'm like, oh no, you did that yourself and we don't have any idea of how we're supposed to sample. So that's kind of my first thing, is trying to avoid lots of self-testing that can go rogue and give you erroneous results that then you're basing these big life decisions on. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, like all things, Googling your symptoms, trying to self-diagnose and self-fix. Not that people aren't capable of doing that, but it definitely can lead you down the wrong path for sure.
And just to further explain why we're chuckling a little bit about the mold test plates, that's not to say people haven't gotten information from those before.
Mm-hmm.
To first realize they have mold issues, but just like any other testing methodologies, they have their limitations. When you set up a plate out on a counter, we're reliant on those mold spores first and foremost actually being aerosolized and not trapped in a wall or settled on your floor, and then and then aerosolizing, and then we're hoping it just happens to land on this little circle of a plate that we have on the counter and not 2 inches next to it. So again, that's not to say you're not going to get information from it or some sort of idea of what's present, but it has its limitations in the type of information we can get from those.
Right. The plates have limitations, and so does even ERMI testing. I'd prefer people do an ERMI if they're going to do any form of self-testing, but it's not perfect. I will tell y'all, I've done many ERMIs on my own environments, and the first 3 or 4 that I did, I honestly don't think I got true results. They were lesser than I expected, knowing what I knew about the environment. And so I know enough to know, like, oh, this is clear. I clearly didn't pick up the whole issue, and I knew enough about the testing to know that it wasn't perfect. But my most recent one that I did, after learning all this stuff and training in this for years, I finally feel like I got an accurate result. So there are a lot of people that hear about them and then go do them, and then they're like, wait, I was supposed to not clean for this amount of time before, and there's so many other factors that are involved. Mm-hmm. So do you guys mind sharing quickly about kind of some of the pitfalls of relying on an ERMI for those decisions as well?
You want me to start, Sean?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, and I'm probably going to step off of the specific type of tests, ERMI or the customary air samples and surface samples. Me as a remediator, usually I'll get that information from the client. They already have it.
Right.
My focus is often why. Why is it there in the first place?
Right.
Is it an active issue, which is introducing these spores into this environment? Or is it from a previous event? Or is it from the outside making its way in? Or something that you have in your environment, house plants and soils and things like that. Right. Like, why is it there in the first place as a remediator is always my first question. Because reducing the particulate count, there are many ways to do it, processes to do it, but if you don't cut the head, off the dragon, it's going to keep on breathing fire, and you're just, spinning your wheels. So,
right.
Those tests also focus on spore. And so that's only a piece of the puzzle for a lot of people. And you know that because you treat people who have exposures, not just to the spore, but the mycotoxins that these molds are giving off.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for me, symptomatically, the spore doesn't tend to bother me, even in quantity. But if I'm in an environment where there's growth, active, wet material, growing molds, and it's producing pungent levels of mycotoxins, and I don't happen to have the right PPE on at the time, it's an immediately there's a neurological response for me. So taking all that information into account, especially the spore type testing where you're seeing on ERMI, like what it's made of, what the score is, still doesn't necessarily tell you whether or not you have an issue that's not actively hidden, that's producing just mycotoxins, and maybe those spores aren't even making their way into the environment at all. You just gave a good example of the apartment you moved into, visually clean. But whatever the cause was in that particular circumstance might not have even been active at that time. Maybe it wasn't raining. Maybe it wasn't humid out. Maybe it was winter, not summer. So there's so many different variables, and that's why I always come back to why is it here?
I think you explained that really well, Adam. The only thing I'll add, I guess, is I think it can be a good screen as long as there is enough dust. But if you're taking it trying to figure out the environment as a whole, that's where I think it creates a lot of stress for people, because then what are the next steps? They have no idea. So if that's the idea and why you're taking it, it's very important to have a consultant on your side that you're doing it with to help you analyze the data and explain it to you. And if you're listening to this and you don't even know what an ERMI is, you're thinking, what are they even talking about? Please reach out to us so we can talk about it, or leave a comment, something like that, and we can explain to you what that type of testing is. But again, it's just it should be seen as a piece of the puzzle, not a full blown. It's not a test where you're going to get a full diagnosis of the home.
Yeah.
Yep. And we have similar screenings with the body that are, we're not going to say, oh, this visual contrast sensitivity was negative, so there's no way that this person has mold toxicity. That's not true, because everyone's body manifests things differently. So maybe some environment's not going to have this like lit up like a Christmas tree ERMI, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good place for you given what your sensitivities are and things like that. So it's kind of like relying on one blood test to tell you everything about your body. It just doesn't make much sense. You need like a whole comprehensive picture. There's a reason we don't just take someone's white blood cell count and say, that explains everything about you. No need to do any other testing. So taking a holistic look is really the big thing. And that's what I really encourage people to do when it comes to the environment, is to address it in a holistic way in terms of looking at the environment, and then figure out where that issue came from, right? And then fix it. Because if we just say, oh, there's mold, I'll just keep cleaning, or, I'm just going to dust a lot because that'll keep the mold at bay, right? We need to figure out where it's coming from and address the source. Otherwise, we will be spinning our wheels. And then once we have assured that the environment is clean or has been cleaned, we figured out where it came from, we address that source, then it comes to things that are more preventative and like maintenance. So I'm a big fan of cleaning. I just tell my people, I'm like, here's your long list of cleaning, and think of it like something proactive that you're doing for your health, not as like a boring checklist of, please buy a Swiffer, things like that. But dusting and vacuuming like a couple times a week, mopping your floors, using the right kind of vacuum, like a HEPA vacuum. And then something that y'all talk about a lot is maintaining indoor humidity levels. That's especially hard for us in Florida. We tend to have not so friendly humidity levels here. I try to tell people you want 30 to 50%, if possible, lower. 50 to 60% is pretty borderline. 60% or greater, large risk for mold growth. So that's kind of how I have people help kind of look at those numbers. But ideally, it'd be even less. It's just Florida. So I try to give people reasonable recommendations of humidity. It depends on the environment and how well ventilated it is, especially like certain rooms, like bathrooms will tend to rate higher on humidity if they aren't well ventilated.
Oh, yeah, especially since you're introducing moisture into the air multiple
Right.
times a day, every day,
Right.
you know,
Yep.
and it
Mhm.
depends on how much the bathroom's being used and then
Right.
how absorbent the materials are that you built your bathroom with. And I think I tend to talk a lot about that kind of stuff on here, so I won't go too deep into that. But we do lots
I
of
need to, whenever we build a house, I'm going to build it just completely out of just one piece of marble is going to be the bathroom.
piece of marble.
Just walls, everything. Sorry, you just go in here. This is just a wet room. Like there's
Yeah.
no
not.
carpet in the bathroom.
It's funny you
please.
exaggerate, but you're not. You wouldn't be off base
Right.
to build it so it can get wet and so that your materials aren't covered in paper in there and particle board
Yeah.
cabinetry and all the stuff that likes moisture and that will hold and absorb it, which is just that's exactly what mold wants.
Yeah, I told my husband it's either that or an outhouse. We have to go to an outhouse only. So we're either going to have one big marble slab. Everything's going to be carved
Outdoor
out.
shower or outdoor
Or
shower.
There you go.
you
You have to worry about it.
So we fixed it. Problem fixed. But that's what the humidity kind of issue comes from. Is a lot of people are like, my bathroom is going to be so beautiful and plush and have carpet and have wallpaper and have all these things, and it's just all these layers of absorbent materials that are not helpful.
Yeah, we're not here to shame you on this show, but if you have carpet in your bathroom, it's time. It's time to have a discussion. We may need to have an intervention. If you know somebody who does, yeah, it's not good.
But for most people that still have it, it's not by choice. It's just they have an older home.
It's aesthetics.
That was the thing back then, and they haven't switched it out yet. It's not because they love having carpet in their bathroom anymore.
I don't know,
but
I don't know. I think people don't generally want it to be gone, but I would tell you that there's reasons beyond aesthetics. So go for it if you're really wanting to get it out.
There's reasons beyond mold to not have it.
I've never lifted up carpet in a bathroom and not seen issues under it. I can't think of one instance where there weren't issues in the bathroom when there was carpet in there.
Surprise, surprise.
The content in this podcast should not be taken as medical advice. While our goal is to educate, the hosts are not medical professionals, and the opinions expressed are their own. For any health concerns or questions about mold exposure and its effects, please seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider.